So far in the NBA playoffs, there's only been one team that's been able to truly test the Oklahoma City Thunder. That is the Denver Nuggets, a team that 2 years ago won the NBA championship. Last year, lost in seven to Minnesota, and then this year lost in seven to the Thunder. Have advanced to the second round the last two seasons, and yet it still feels like there's a lot of questions about what this team is going to look like going forward. They've been able to have a lot of success in recent years. Obviously, number one reason is Nikola Jokic, the best player in basketball. I think that helps a little bit, but also continuity has been a big thing for them. And that didn't hold true this year as they fired Michael Malone, head coach Michael Malone, just before the end of the regular season. Also parted ways with GM Calvin Booth just before the end of the regular season. New regime in here. Interim head coach David Adelman is going to continue to run this team. Then they have a new GM as well. We'll see. Is this team going to look exactly the same next season? Are they going to rely on the power of friendship, as some other teams have? Or are they going to make some upgrades to maybe have a more talented team around Jokic? We'll see what they end up doing. But before we dive into Denver, I wanted to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing. We've also got the NHL and NBA playoffs. We've got the NBA finals. It's a great series to bet on if you are interested in betting. And if you want to go ahead and get in on the action, the lines have been available on betonline.com. Currently, for game one, the Thunder are favored by 9.5 points. And for the series, they're minus 670 on BetOnline. If you continue to believe in this Pacers team and you want to get in on the action, BetOnline is a great place to do that. If you think that the Thunder are going to win this series pretty handily, which is what the odds are suggesting, you can put your money where your mouth is. BetOnline is a great place to do that. They also have the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB to the NHL to UFC, and they remain the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. And then in between the games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, the Denver Nuggets finished 50-32 this year, beat the Clippers in 7 games, and then lost to the Thunder in 7 games. After OKC swept Memphis, it felt like, okay, like maybe nobody's really going to be able to compete with this team. They were just dominant that whole series, despite what Ja Morant said about figuring them out. Maybe they would have won that game had he not got hurt. I don't think that Memphis would have won that series. But then all of a sudden, OKC looks very beatable because Denver wins game one, pushes it to a game 7. They just weren't able to finish things out. But then OKC goes in and pretty much controls the series against Minnesota. I mean, it was a competitive series, but 1 in 5 games. So now you go back and you say, oh, okay, maybe the Clippers were a little bit better than we thought. Maybe Denver was even better than we thought, which I don't think anybody was saying that those teams weren't good, but it gives them a little bit more credit for their season. You say, oh, maybe if the matchups were a little different, maybe if they were on the other side of the bracket, they'd have been a Western Conference Finals team. I think matchups are everything in the playoffs, so much more so than seeding. It's who you're matched up with, how you fit against them. So that's obviously a pretty big factor. But I think this Denver team is one of the best in the league. I don't think that's a crazy statement to make. But now they have to decide if, with this roster that they currently have, they want to run things back once again. It's not an old roster, but it's an aging roster. I think that's fair to say. Jokic and Aaron Gordon around 30. Jamal Murray and MPJ are getting closer to that. There's still some young pieces on there as well, which we'll get into some of the pieces specifically, who will be back, who continues to fit, who should potentially be moved, things like that. we don't have much to talk about with the draft here because Denver doesn't have any picks. They're sending out their first round pick to Orlando from the Aaron Gordon trade, and then there's second round pick swaps with Philly and Phoenix. So Denver has no draft picks at all this year. And looking ahead, they don't have too many more draft picks. They have their own first in 26, 28, and 30. But because they don't have their own first this year in 27 and 29, they can't trade those firsts. They can do swaps, but they can't trade those firsts. And then they have their first in 2031, which they can trade unprotected. Now, if Denver really, really wants to go in on maximizing the Jokic timeline and dealing with the consequences of a couple of poor seasons without control of your first round pick after, they could trade the rights to swap the first round picks the next few years, which wouldn't hurt them too bad because if all goes according to plan, there wouldn't be a reason to swap those picks because this team would be having one of the best records in the league. And then an unprotected first in 2031, which it's too far out. It'd be such a gamble, but would be a move that they're able to make. Basically, everything else has been traded. So not a ton of draft capital here to work with, but there's a little bit. And then we look at who's under contract for next season. Most of this team is going to be back, at least the people that were, or the players that were playing in the rotation. Dario Saric and Russell Westbrook have player options. Who knows what Saric is going to do? Wasn't really part of the rotation. Westbrook is more of a question mark. He could definitely be back. He could definitely choose to go elsewhere. I think that was the question he was asked after they lost Game 7, but he didn't want to answer that one. But I think that he could definitely be back and continue to play a significant role off the bench. It really is impressive how well Russell Westbrook has played. And I know it hasn't been flawless because it's still the Russell Westbrook experience. And what he does best at this point of his career is create chaos. And that's both good and bad because he creates chaos in a good way where it helps the team, where he's forcing turnovers or drawing fouls or bringing energy or hitting big shots, but he's also creating chaos in ways that are negative. And that's just the Russell Westbrook experience. That's not me being positive or negative. It's just saying that's just the way it is. But the fact that he's doing this at his age, when he is a player that has relied on athleticism so much in his career, he's 36 years old. He'll be 37 in November. And no, he doesn't have the bounce that he used to have, but he's still flying all over the court, playing with 110% every play, which is incredibly respectable, especially at his age. So this is not going to be the show that demonizes Russell Westbrook. It's an honest evaluation that there are those plays that, and sometimes they stand out more than others, that aren't the best. But that's the most negative I'm going to be about Russ. This team, if they just want to run it back, they'll be a competitive team once again. And when you have Jokic on the floor, you have a chance to beat anyone. It's just the way it is. However, I think that this team needs to either make a move or make moves to improve this roster around Jokic. What does that look like? Who knows? I think MPJ is probably the most tradable or most likely to be traded player on this roster because his contract would fit in deal to bring in another star level player. But he also fits pretty well. He's not a high usage player. Jokic will find him for his open threes. And he obviously also hits contested threes. Doesn't do a ton with the ball in his hands, but is capable of doing, like, putting the ball on the floor when he needs, but not his strongest attribute. I think the defensive question marks are probably the reason that they could look at someone else. And then he did showcase some improved rebounding, which I think was helpful for his case to kind of show some buy-in from him, which I think was important. both for his trade value or just for him if he continues to stick around. And if he wants to stick around, makes him more valuable to this team if he can continue to buy in ways that helps this team win. Okay, let's talk about some of the players specifically. We can start with the man himself, Nikola Jokic, who is the best player in fantasy basketball. Not number one in dynasty leagues, but he is the best player in fantasy basketball pretty easily. There's no, if you're doing a redraft league next year, we'll have the discussions again. Maybe you go Wemby. Maybe you go SGA. We'll have the discussions again. Jokic is going to be the best player in fantasy basketball again next season. But if 9-cat rankings don't reflect that, it's because Wemby's probably averaging 7 blocks per game or something absurd like that. I think that just how important Jokic is to this team, combined with how friendly his stat set is for fantasy basketball, plus just how good he is, he's going to continue to be the number one player. In 9-cat, in points leagues, in Roto, in head-to-head. In dynasty leagues, would probably have him 3 or 4. I think it would go Wemby, maybe SGA, and then Luka and Jokic. That's like the clear top 4 right now in dynasty. We'll see. Maybe at this point next season, it's a very different conversation, and it's a top 5 with Cooper Flag in it. But even though Jokic is 30, he's still a top 4 player in dynasty leagues and the number 1 player in redraft leagues. Averaged 29.6 points, 12.7 rebounds, 10.2 assists, 1.8 steals, and 2 threes per game while shooting 58% from the floor, 42% from 3, 80% from the free throw line. Just absurd production. Not much is going to change. We've been saying this for years. His game is going to age gracefully because he doesn't rely on a ton of athleticism, and he's one of the smartest players in the NBA. One of the best minds in the NBA. There's a reason that he's almost 7 feet tall and is one of the leaders in assists per game every year because he just finds everyone. He understands where everyone is. His brain is one of the sharpest in the league. So even when he's 35 years old, he may not be quite as dominant as he is now, but he's still going to be one of the best players in the league. Pretty confident in that. Played 70 games this past season, 36.7 minutes per game. He's so valuable to this team. If they want to have a chance at hosting in the first round of the playoffs, Jokic has to play 36, 37 minutes per game. We see what happens when he comes off the court in the regular season, in the playoffs. Things don't go well for this team. Jokic has to be on the floor. Now, part of their goal this offseason should be acquiring players that make this not the case. Frankly, it's great for fantasy basketball that he has to play 37 minutes per game for this team to be competitive. But ideally, if you're running a team, you want your best player to be able to step off the floor for a few minutes and you not give up a 10-point run or have a 10-point swing within 2 minutes every time. And obviously that doesn't happen every time, but you don't want that fear. And maybe it's that they can't, when Jokic is off the floor, they need to have the other 4 starters on every single time, but Jokic maximizes these players the same way. I mean, not to say that they're not good and then play with Jokic and now they are good, but he maximizes everyone. Things get easier when the defense is worrying about Jokic. So I think acquiring a player that not only fits well with Jokic, but also can step up when Jokic is off the floor, which I think is the idea behind adding a player like Russell Westbrook over the summer, is he can have the ball in his hands, he can facilitate, he can control a game when Jokic is off the floor, and then when he's on the floor, he can cut and get easy buckets up from Jokic. It'd be that idea, but a player more in their prime that's truly able to control a game, and you feel confident that they're going to take care of things. As I said at the beginning with Russ, it's the Russell Westbrook experience. Sometimes it's going to go really well, and sometimes it did go really well, and then other times it was the results were mixed. That's how we'll put it. It wasn't always perfect, but again, that's Russell Westbrook's style of play. All that being said, if they do acquire a player that can help make things a little bit better when Jokic is off the floor, where that still fits really well with Jokic, I'm not sure who that is because, again, your path to upgrading is MPJ, a few pick swaps, and an unprotected 2031 first, as well as a couple of younger prospects who some of these prospects aren't even as young because they've drafted a little older, but like Trey Alexander, Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett probably has some value. He had a couple good games this past season. I don't really foresee them wanting to trade Peyton Watson or Julian Strawther just for depth purposes. But if that's what it takes, and then I guess that's the other question is all these teams are winning because of their depth. Does it make sense for Denver to like part with even more of their depth? They're not a very deep team. There was times where when MPJ was hurt in the playoffs and Russell, because he had the shoulder issue, and Russell Westbrook literally had fractures in his hand and was playing through it. Peyton Watson was solid. Julian Strawther was solid, but like not super experienced in the playoffs. And then Aaron Gordon wasn't fully healthy. So it's like you basically have like 4 players you can trust, and one of them is an unhealthy Aaron Gordon. And then there's teams like OKC that are like 13 deep. So does Denver opt to sacrifice even more of that depth and try and fill it out through free agency? Maybe. We'll see. But what is MPJ 3 pick swaps that may or may not convey and an unprojected 2031 first plus Peyton Watson plus Julian Strawther if they choose to like truly trade everything, and I'm not sure that's a great idea. What does that even get you? Who does that get you? What is MPJ's trade value like? Does anyone care about those firsts or the potential to swap? Because unless your team is definitely going to be better than Denver, which there's not too many players or not too many teams that can say that also would want Michael Porter Jr. and part with a player for that to happen. It's just a very interesting case, very specific team I think it would take, and I'm not even sure what that team is. But is that player you're getting, is that enough? I, I'm not sure who that is, and I'm not sure if it is. Just looking at a few teams, I mean, if and this is just speculation, not even saying this makes a ton of sense, but like a team like a Boston, I don't think that a trade that's anywhere remotely close to value for Jaylen Brown. Philly, would you do that for Paul George? I don't think so. Um, Going through team by team, not seeing a ton that I feel pretty confident in. If you're a team in the West, do you even worry about it? Like, okay, here's one, which I don't think this is something that Denver would do, but like Sacramento trading DeMar DeRozan, I don't think DeRozan's a great fit here. You have MPJ, who is a low usage floor spacer, trading for DeMar DeRozan, a high usage non floor spacer. DeMar's expanded his range a little bit, but nowhere near the floor space that MPJ is. And you would appreciate the fact that DeMar can kind of control the game when Jokic is on the bench, but I'm not sure that a trade package of MPJ plus picks is enough or it makes sense for Denver. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's. I mean, I don't know if Laurie Markkinen is that, or if that is something that Utah would even be interested in. I don't know. I feel like I'm just speculating now, and like, is that even helpful? Probably not. All that to be said, Jokic is going to continue to be Jokic. I think that the other factors on this team, as far as who could be traded, who could be moved, it's all centered around Jokic, but I don't think there's much that could happen that could really change how Jokic produces, which is better than anyone else in the league. Okay, moving down in terms of leading scorers, the next player is Jamal Murray, who, because of, I guess, injury question marks the past few seasons, kind of slides a little bit in redraft leagues, which I think is fair. But you also have to be a little encouraged by this past season. Just looking back, 2020, 2021 season, played 48 games. Believe that was a slightly shortened season. I think it was like 72 games, but still played 48 games. Missed the whole next season, 2022, 23, 65 games at 33 minutes per game. Last season was 23, 24, 59 games, 31 and a half minutes per game. This past season played 67 games, which was his most since the 2018, 2019 season, year 3 in the league. Played 36.1 minutes per game, which is a new career high. 21.4 points, new career high. 3.9 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.4 steals. That was a new career high. 2.3 threes per game. So Jamal Murray was producing at a high level. But even more importantly than that, because we know that he's going to be good during the regular season and then really step up in the playoffs, which I think we saw him have a good postseason this year, but it wasn't like the last two haven't really been what he's done in the past as far as being a playoff riser, like a real true playoff riser, was what we saw when they won a championship. But I think also it's the narrative of Jamal Murray being a playoff riser, teams focusing on him more, makes life a little bit more difficult for him. He the last two postseasons hasn't shot the ball the way he did when they won a championship or the postseason before that, which was the bubble postseason when he averaged 26 and a half points per game and made over half his shots and shot 45% from three, are just absurd numbers. So, yes, we know Jamal Murray is going to rise in the playoffs. How much? Maybe not as much as we think. But the improvement during the regular season and the improved availability, I think, has been huge. He was where did he rank in 9-cat during the regular season? Maybe it wasn't so it was a second round value during the regular season in 9-cat leagues, which I think is pretty encouraging. Let's see. Is my freezing? Some technical difficulties there. Not sure exactly. Hopefully, not too much was cut off. But Jamal Murray, second round producer during the regular season, playing 67 games, 36 minutes per game. That's encouraging stuff for dynasty managers because due to his injury history, it felt like, okay, maybe he was a guy that was going to play 50-something games per season, no back-to-backs, limited minutes, so that he can be that quote-unquote playoff riser. But that didn't happen this past season. So I'm pretty encouraged by that. Definitely valuing Jamal Murray higher than I did previously, because if he's playing, he's going to be good. And we saw what he did in terms of strictly just 9-cat value this season. Shot a high percentage at the free throw line, had a lot of success. Very encouraged by what we saw from Jamal Murray this season. Not expecting too much to change the next couple of years. Even if they acquire a third star, maybe if it is, again, I don't think they have the trade package to get a third star that would be better than Jamal Murray. So Jamal Murray will continue to be the number 2 scoring option for this team. Player we've talked about a little bit already, that's Michael Porter Jr., averaged 18.2 points, 7 rebounds, 2.1 assists per game. Also averaged 2.5 threes per game, shot just under 40% on his threes. This was probably his best season since his second year in the league, which was a phenomenal season for fantasy basketball. It seemed like he was going to be a true superstar that Denver stole at the end of the lottery because of the injury history, and then the injuries flared back up. So it's taken him a little bit because he was a third round value that season, which was just year 2 in the league. Shot 54.2% from the floor that season. So he shot over 50% from the floor this season, which was encouraging. And again, I said the 7 rebounds per game, which is what he's done the last 2 seasons, still a good option from behind the 3-point line, good scoring option. 2.1 assists for a career high, but it's not that much. That's not his job. He's not a primary playmaker. He'll continue to be what he is, decent on the glass and a floor spacer. And I think that there's a good chance that MPJ is traded, even if it's not for this third all-star caliber player, because we know that Jokic has never played with an all-star or a player that's made an all-star game the same season while playing alongside Jokic. I don't think that MPJ plus whatever pick swaps or picks or other players you attach, I don't think that's really enough to get that third star. So I don't know. I think he's still the most likely player to be traded. It just may not be for who they're hoping it can be for. But there's also a chance that they don't trade him because they say, well, is this other player we'd be trading for even that much better than MPJ? Maybe not. So we'll just stick with him. And I think we're going to continue to see the same thing from Michael Porter Jr. Threes, decent rebounds, not much else. He's not a great option for category leagues, but he's not bad. There's not a ton of upside, I would say. We know his role. He knows his role. Not going to change as long as he's in Denver. And I think we've seen a number of just weird situations with him over the last few years. We'll see if that changes moving forward, if he's still there. But if he is traded elsewhere, it would definitely depend on the situation. But could we see him have the ball in his hands a little bit more? Potentially. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. But I would say it's we could see the ball in his hands more, but also it benefits players to be playing next to Jokic and to have Jokic facilitating you open shots. So does that actually help MPJ? Like how much does his field goal percentage fall from having to create his own shot a little bit more? Like just looking at I pulled this stat up really to talk about Christian Brown here in a minute, but percentage of your like player percentage of shots that were assisted. Michael Porter Jr., 80.7% of his shots were assisted. So, I mean, among players that played at least 28 minutes per game, that's like top 20. He's not, and a lot of the players in front of him are either bigs like Jared Allen, Brook Lopez, Kristaps Porzingis, Vucevic, Draymond Green, or they're 3-point specialists like him, like a Tim Hardaway Jr., Grady Dick, Lou Dort, Larry Markkinen. I mean, right around him, right just below him, Keegan Murray had less of his shots assisted than MPJ by percentages, and it's just ever so slightly, just about 1.3%. But point is, MPJ did not do much shot creation this year and really hasn't in the past. So does trading him to a situation where he is creating more of his shots, is that a good thing? Potentially, but maybe not. Moving on with this team, the fourth leading scorer was Christian Brown, who I think he had a breakout season. Christian Brown definitely improved this year, and I don't want to take that away from him. I wrote about Christian Brown's improvement early in the season, but also wrote about why it happened. And why did it happen? Well, Jokic. Frankly, I think that Christian Brown was made in a lab to be the perfect fit, the perfect starting shooting guard for Jokic. Whoever was pounding the table, whether it was a scout or an assistant coach or whoever, or some other assistant GM, whoever was pounding the table in the Denver draft room saying, we need Christian Brown with the 21st pick this year in 2022. Shout out to them because they knew what they were talking about. Whoever that was, not sure who it was, but whoever it was said this man was cooked up in a lab to benefit from Jokic. Now, Christian Brown made real improvements this year, and he was very good. Averaged 15.4 points, 5.2 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game, 1.1 steals per game, 1.1 threes per game, all of which were career highs. Also shot 58% from the floor. That's absurd from a 6'6" guard. There are not many players that are going. I'll pull the stat up, but the players that are shooting at least 58% from the floor, there's not too many that are 6'6". I would say the only players that are probably close to that are Amen Thompson and SGA. But how is Christian Brown getting these shots? Well, of his 2-point field goal attempts, and not even including the threes, which players are more than likely going to have the majority of their threes assisted, just with the way that games are played. There are the players that are going to create their own 3-point shots more than they're going to have them assisted, such as a Luka Doncic, such as a Trae Young, a James Harden. And I don't have those exact percentages in front of me, but more often than not, most players are going to have 80+% of their 3-point shots assisted. As far as their 2-point field goal attempts, especially guards, they're more likely to create more than they are for the 3-point shots. 76.2% of Christian Brown's 2-point field goal attempts were assisted. Now, among players that played at least 28 minutes per game, that was 9th in the league. And the players in front of him, Miles Turner, big. Jared Allen, big. Rui Hachimura, swing, but bigger than Christian Brown and a floor spacer. Grant Williams, who barely played any games, but close player. Tim Hardaway Jr., not creating his own 2-point shots. Draymond Green, Grady Dick. Kristaps Porzingis as well. Those are the players who had more of their 2-point field goals made assisted than Christian Brown. Christian Brown just simply, whether it was cutting to the basket or in transition, Christian Brown got where Jokic would find him and he would score. And yeah, had a lot of success doing that. He also, so I'll pull this up here just to look at it because NBA.com is great with some of these stats and can show, if it'll even let me. Maybe it won't. Yeah, okay, never mind. Christian Brown had a lot of his points assisted specifically from Jokic. So what does that mean for him? Yes, he made strides this season. He really improved. He was phenomenal for fantasy basketball. And that should continue moving forward. He's 24 years old. He's not anywhere near his peak. But I think if you're going to value him in Dynasty Leagues, the caveat is that we know how much he relies on Jokic. And I still think he is a very good basketball player, even if he wasn't playing next to Jokic. He would still have success. But he's maximized by the fact that he is playing next to Jokic. He is getting easier shots than most other players in the NBA because he moves well, because he cuts well, because he runs, but also because he's playing with Jokic. So if Christian Brown was on a different team, I think his value drops. And I don't think that that's a complete knock on him because, again, he's still a very good player, but his talent is just maximized. So you can value him fairly high in Dynasty Leagues. And when I say fairly high, I'm top 100. I haven't done Dynasty rankings in a while to put an exact range on how to value Christian Brown. But typically with Dynasty rankings, we value or we try and rank individuals as opposed to the situation. And situation is like a secondary factor to me. We're evaluating the specific player. And then as almost like a tiebreaker, you look at the situation. But I think you have to bump Christian Brown up a good bit because of his situation, with the understanding that if he were on a different team, he would get bumped down a good bit. Now, Christian Braun is going to be due an extension. Next year's the last season of his contract, and then he's a restricted free agent. It'll be interesting to see how Denver operates, because I think that he's more valuable in Denver than he is anywhere else. So is he going to be able to get a new contract on the open market that Denver's says, oh man, we definitely have to match this, even if it is more than we are willing to pay? Or is it going to be like, well, yeah, you can go try and find a contract. He finds one, and Denver's like, great, we would have paid you more. Cool, we'll match it. Instead of bidding against themselves, saying, hey, we're going to give you $25, $30 million a year. We're going to give you this $120 million contract for a player that, again, is very good on this team, but maybe wouldn't be as good elsewhere. I just think it's an interesting situation that Denver will have to figure out. And the ideal scenario for everyone is that Christian Braun stays in Denver and continues to enjoy a lot of success. But I'm just curious to see how that impacts how much he gets paid. As long as Christian Braun is in Denver, he's going to be a successful player, specifically in fantasy basketball. If you are building out a team in a 9-cat league where you're trying to maximize your field goal percentage, say you started your team with SGA, and this would be redraft league, but it also, obviously the same concept applies to a dynasty. But you start your redraft team out with SGA, you're like, okay, field goal percentage is going to be a strength. We can get bigs that are able to fit that as well. Maybe less threes. Maybe you punt threes because of that. Christian Braun would be a great fit. He hit 1.1 threes per game this past season. That's not a strength of his to space the floor. I mean, that's why he's able to shoot 58% from the floor. There's definitely value to be had here, but I think we just need to understand the caveat that, yes, he is maximized playing next to Jokic, and Jokic is going to get his teammates paid. That is a good thing for the players. It's a good thing for fantasy basketball, but it's just the understanding that if Denver is, drafting players that, and they don't have too many picks, but a player like a Christian Braun that's going in the late first round, that in a redraft, if you looked at it, you'd probably say that he would go a good bit earlier. But if he's not playing next to Jokic, does he? I don't know. It's an interesting thing that hopefully we just won't ever have to worry about, because Christian Braun will spend the next 5 years of his career at least playing next to Jokic. All right. Believe next on this list we have is Aaron Gordon, who had a few injuries this past season, which limited his games played. But I think he's aging like fine wine as far as his impact in the league. And he's been so valuable to Denver the last few seasons. And I think in Orlando, he was good. And he was a high-flying, like, forward. But then he goes to Denver, and now he's playing meaningful playoff basketball consistently and helping compete for championships, and he's reinventing his game. I think specifically as a floor spacer this year, he was huge. Shot 43.6% on threes. Still is athletic. Maybe not what he once was, but still is a freak athlete. Decent playmaker. Does a lot of the little things. Good defender. He, again, reinvented his game to be a supplementary player on a championship team as opposed to a star player. That's still a player that gets paid. Don't make a mistake on that. It's still a player that will get paid. And I think some of the injuries were discouraging this past season. He's a decent fantasy option, but not great. I don't think he holds a ton of value in fantasy in the same way that he does in real life for Denver. But he's still going to contribute to this team at a high level. He's still going to play a ton of minutes, which there's not a ton more to talk about here. So I'm going to use this as a good segue to say, because he's going to be the starting power forward, there's not a ton of minutes for a player like Peyton Watson, who has been kind of a dynasty sleeper the last few seasons. We did see him take on more minutes with Aaron Gordon sidelined early in the season. Frankly, a tad bit discouraged by that. Averaged 8.1 points per game this year, along with 3.4 rebounds, 1.4 assists, and 1.4 blocks. And I think the defensive stats are great. When he plays a lot, he can, especially with blocks, like he'll get steals as well, but he is a athletic shot blocker. And if he continues to sit behind Aaron Gordon and continues to develop, he's 22, there's no rush here. And he eventually gets to a point where he's playing starters minutes next to Jokic, and he's, hitting catch and shoot threes and cutting to the basket, getting dunks, getting transition buckets. And he's on the floor enough, and he's also grabbing rebounds and blocking shots. That's a good fantasy player. It's an impactful fantasy player. I think he still has that upside, even if we're not seeing it in a significant role. And when he started for Aaron Gordon earlier in the season, maybe he didn't contribute maybe as much as we wanted him to. As I pull up a few of these games just to look at what his exact numbers were when he started. So it was in November that Aaron Gordon got hurt. And he was able to, again, contribute blocks, double-digit scoring, about 5 rebounds per game, a 3 or 2, a steal, nothing that exploded. And we saw other players around the league, and this happens every season. Some players step in when the starter gets hurt, and they pop. And we're like, oh, that's really encouraging, or oh, they're not giving that starting spot back, like an Amen Thompson. Peyton Watson, I still think has upside here. We still have to be encouraged by the little spurts we see and understand that, like some of the other players we've talked about, if he's starting the power forward next to Jokic, that's a role that will maximize his talent. But if Aaron Gordon still as impactful as he is, we may not see that opportunity as much. And then there was also times where Aaron Gordon was hurt and Russell Westbrook got the start. I don't know if that happens with David Adelman, head coach, instead of Mike Malone, but we'll see. I'm sure Aaron Gordon will not play 82 games the rest of his career. So we'll probably see some Peyton Watson opportunities to start. He's also due a new contract. This will be the last season of his. I think that what Christian Brown showed was productive enough to earn him a sizable deal. Peyton Watson, we're still banking on upside here. So we'll see. He might be able to get a good contract based on his upside, but I'm not entirely sure yet. I think it could be a big season upcoming for him if they don't figure out anything before the season. And it is that untapped potential. It's very impactful in a category league. Hopefully we'll get the opportunity to see him in a larger role. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if he is included as a trade piece, because he does have upside, maybe he gets to play in a situation where he does play more. I'm not sure what that is, but potentially. Another player who's kind of in competition with Christian Brown to start at the beginning of the season is Julian Strawther. And the conversation, and from what I remember, maybe it was just a conversation I had in my head, was Julian Strawther is a better floor spacer and shooter than Christian Brown, but Christian Brown's basically doing almost everything else better. And Strawther did have some solid games as a rookie and in year 2. He had 15 points in game 6 against OKC, hit a couple threes, had a few games throughout the regular season where he got hot. He also missed a significant period of time. Yeah. Was that the fractured hand or wrist in early March, and then was sidelined until early April. He is a good floor spacer and will continue to, I think, be a nice reserve for them. Not a ton of upside here, but when he's playing, you can hit threes and then hopefully get you a couple other stats here and there. And that's really, really it for Julian Strawther. I think he has the potential to be a strong contributor for this team. I don't think it works out great for fantasy basketball, for a category league specifically. And then in a points leagues, if he's not getting you a ton of many defensive stats, or maybe gets you an assist or two, maybe a few rebounds, but not a ton of value here. But if he does get the chance to start or play significant minutes, he is more than capable of getting hot from three and making a huge impact that way. Don't think he holds a ton of value, but things can change quickly if he takes on more of a role in Denver. I think the last play, because there's some of these guys they've taken either in the second round, or I believe Trey Alexander was even an undrafted free agent, or am I totally remembering that? Yeah, undrafted free agent. Second round, late first round picks, just players that are a little older for rookies that I guess they hope they can rely on to step in and play minutes quickly. Another example of that is Jalen Pickett, who they drafted in the beginning of the second round, 2023, who's already 25 years old and will be 26 years old right around the start of this upcoming season. But they draft these guys with the idea that, hey, we're going to have these late first round picks. We're not going to have these lottery picks. We don't have do we really want to develop these players, or would we rather get someone that can contribute right now? Jalen Pickett in April had a couple of really strong games. He had a triple-double loss to the Spurs, 17 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, and then had another game later in April still against Sacramento with 18 points, 4 assists, 5 threes. In that game against San Antonio, basically nobody played. But he was able to step in and do that. Don't remember if that was the second night of a back. It was the second night of a back-to-back. But he saw a few starts around then. I don't think there's a ton to take away from that. I mean, it was just they just didn't have Jamal Murray available for a few games. But it was encouraging to see a second-year player get a triple-double, just step into a role and do that. I think he'll continue to be a nice reserve for them. Not a ton of value there in category leagues, in any sort of fantasy league, unless there's an injury to Jamal Murray, which, given his injury history, isn't impossible, but it's not something we can predict. But it was cool to see that. I think that's mainly just what I wanted to highlight. I don't think it's anything to draw conclusions from, or let me go trade for Jalen Pickett now because he had a triple-double in April. Silly season. So I just thought it was worth highlighting. And then, of course, we mentioned Russell Westbrook at the beginning. It's going to continue to be the Russell Westbrook experience. There's probably going to be a few weeks over the next, as long as he keeps playing, it's going to be a few weeks where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy, it's Russell Westbrook. He's back. He's continuing to be dominated. And then there's going to be some stretches where you're like, oh, that's why he's not getting paid what he once was. Again, it's the Russell Westbrook experience. I don't think that is a significant factor for Denver moving forward. Is just Russell Westbrook. It's not. It's based on Jokic and how they build this team around him. I think it would be silly to not try and improve this team around him, but I don't have the clear path for how they're going to truly improve this team to make them even better than they were this year. But again, as I said earlier, they just stick with what they got. They're still going to be competitive. We'll see if they can make any other sort of improvement, but that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at NoRuben22. You can like, you can comment, you can subscribe. I will be back tomorrow with Matt Lawson to continue with our Dynasty Startup mock draft. And then we will continue on with some of these other teams until we wrap that up. And if we have to, because the NBA Finals taking a little longer, we'll delay the Pacers and Thunder episodes and just talk more draft, because that's coming up at the end of this month. It is officially draft month. That is very exciting. I've really enjoyed. It was a delayed start for me with this scouting process, but I've really enjoyed scouting this class. It's been a ton of fun for me. I'm excited to see where these guys land, how they look in summer league, how they look as rookies. I think it's a fun class. But that's going to do it for this episode, and I will see you tomorrow.